Welcome back to Digging Deeper with the Missourian. I'm Dakota Oswalt, and this is News in a Minute. Let's get into this week's stories. Another voting season is here, and Maryville residents will have the opportunity to vote for or against Proposition Spoofhound April 7th. Proposition Spoofhound would grant the district a full waiver of the Proposition C sales tax rollback. Maryville R2 School District Superintendent Philip Porin said enacting this proposition would generate around $875,000 for the district. As your tax base grows, that 1 cent sales tax, you get lesser and lesser of it. It's kind of an equalizer, if you will, Porin said. Next, a Mosaic Medical Center Maryville nurse practitioner, Tabitha Beck, was asked by Kerecis, an Icelandic medical company, to test its bandages. Kerecis uses decellularized skin of the Atlantic cod to treat wounds. This is the first company in history to use fish skin to treat wounds. Now our product, our trial, did not use any fish skin. Specifically, ours was mainly just utilizing the advanced wound care dressing to help. But when you use these two products in combination, statistically, with some research trials, that wound healing is significantly reduced, and that's really exciting, Beck said. Finally, the field of education has never stopped changing, and the preparation to become a teacher has continued to adapt. There are over 40 bills circulating in the Missouri House of Representatives regarding education. Middle school education major Cole Findling said after taking classes at Northwest where some bills were in the curriculum, he realized he should keep more up to date with the House. Whether you're a teacher or not, you are probably going to be affected by the school system in your area, no matter what. I think it's important to always stay on top of what your state is doing, and especially what your state's doing that affects the education of your kid, Findling said. Now let's take a look at where the news has taken reporter Micah Stoley this week.
No matter it being cold outside, these protesters are here to share their side. I'm Micah Stoley with Digging Deeper, and I'm here on South Main Street, where protesters are gathered to protest against the current administration. Here's more. Residents from across Missouri met for the third time in Maryville to protest the Trump administration as part of the worldwide No Kings protest. March 28th marked the third No Kings protest to take place in Maryville, with the first happening in June and the second in October. Nancy Zeliff, one of the co-organizers for the No Kings protest in Maryville, said people around the world are taking a stand against the administration.
There are over 3,500 rallies across our country and the globe taking a strong stand against the regime in Washington, D.C. and our president. There's no kings in our country, has not been since 1776.
The third No Kings protest in Maryville took place along South Main Street across from Walmart, where protesters lined up with signs to protest the Trump administration. Protesters would wave their signs at passing cars and meet with other protesters. Zeliff said the presence of people is what matters the most to her, as she said any presence makes a difference. She said that she has worked with residents of Nottoway County and other counties around the area. One of the groups working with the No Kings protest is Respect Missouri Voters. Megan Vessel, protester and supporter of Respect Missouri Voters, said she has seen increased support for the protests across Missouri.
I've been to all of the No Kings rallies, and every time it's gotten bigger. There's been more and more people who have shown up, and more people who have honked friendly, and waved and things like that. And so anytime we can see that, I like to shout and jump up and go, "Thank you so much." Even if you can't stand here, you're still showing support, and it's encouraging to see.
Respect Missouri Voters is a campaign in Missouri aiming to provide greater clarity for Missourians voting on the ballot. The campaign emphasizes holding politicians accountable and making sure they can't change or undo propositions by requiring an 80% approval vote by both chambers to change any laws. Zeliff said no matter what people do or say, having a voice is everything in a political atmosphere.
Silence is complicity, and so if your silence is just sitting in your home, in your comfort zone, that is complicity to what's going on. If you are in favor of what we're doing, you can drive by and honk. If you're not in favor of us, you can raise your middle finger and we'll smile and wave.
Sadly, this segment has reached the end of the road. I'm Micah Stoley with Digging Deeper, and no need to protest. We'll have more back at the studio. Thank you for joining me.
Welcome back to the interview portion of Digging Deeper. In this segment, I'll be getting the inside scoop from the reporter of the top story each week. This week, I'll be talking about the Maryville elections with managing editor Dakota Oswalt and news editor Anna Bailey. Welcome, guys. So this week, our news section was entirely election coverage. Would we each like to share what we covered?
I covered the Maryville City Council. There were 4 candidates running for 3 positions.
And I covered the local school board, and so there were 5 candidates for this, and I talked to each of them individually.
I was able to cover Proposition Spoof Hound, as well as just give some important information to our voters. So obviously, elections aren't something that we cover every day. How does this content vary from our normal content?
So instead of getting multiple interviews for like what I would do for news stories, I just talked to each candidate individually, and then I had to write the exact same amount of words for each candidate.
And then also looking at a design standpoint, we have to make everything look as equal as possible. And so, for example, we had a spread that had bio boxes for each of the school board candidates. Each of these boxes had to be the same size. Each of their photos had to be the same size, and all of the words had to be generally about the same amount in length.
When did you guys start preparing for this, and what did that preparation look like?
I've been covering the city council meetings here in town for 2 years now, so I have a rapport built up with most of the members of city council. So that rapport was basically my preparation for this.
We also started discussing who was going to cover what and how we were going to do so about a month early. This is a little bit different for us because typically news stories are assigned about a week or 2 weeks before the due date. And so that's kind of how we made sure that everything was going to get covered equally and enough.
For me, it was just a lot of background research, especially with a tax increase. That's going to have a lot of opinions from local community members, things like that. So I definitely went into my interviews with a lot of background research. So why would you guys say that covering elections is so important, including at a local level?
A lot of election coverage you're going to see on most news sites is going to be like the big nationwide elections, like the presidential elections. But it's important to pay attention to these local elections because they do affect people more closely.
Yeah, and also in a college town, it may look like we don't need to cover these local elections because a lot of the people who live in this town can't vote here. But it's still important because as the Missourian specifically, we are one of the papers that cover the community. We're one of 2. And so just because we're a college paper, that doesn't mean that it's not just as important for us to cover the local elections.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. For more stories like this, make sure to check out nwmissourinews.com or pick up a paper from one of the stands around campus. I'm Hannah Claywell, and thank you for watching. See you next week.